I've been talking about connecting notes, pairs of notes in the different scales, you know, the blues scale and whatnot. And we talked about blue notes. I want to go back to some technical tips. I'm just going to close out this lesson with some technical tips, and we're going to do some of those over-the-shoulder shots, so you'll see what it looks like from a player standpoint. I talked a lot about dampening, right hand dampening, you know, all that stuff, and then the left hand. Well, there are certain instances where you just don't have an option. You have to do the best you can. And how you have your guitar set up can affect that, the size of your fingers, the angles you're coming in. Sometimes it's just a wrestling match no matter how long you've been playing, because certain keys, the action's going to be higher and it'll give you some fits. But I'm going to talk briefly about these licks so you can kind of categorize them and you'll know what you're up against. One of the most common licks you'll see, again, we'll go back to the key of A. We've got A minor pentatonic and the A blues scale where we throw in that flat 5. A very common opening lick would be 4, bent either to 5 or to flat 5. Then you immediately go to the 5 and then the 1. It's kind of like the phrase "you know" that's used and overused so much in the English language. This lick, so you see what I'm doing there? It goes back to that theme and variations idea. Play that lick and do wherever you want to go. But anyway, back to the technique. When you play this lick, you can't bend with that first finger in the dampening posture because then you'd have to move it over. It's inefficient, and also you lose leverage. Remember, I used that term earlier. So again, going back to the setup of a riff and the fingering, the setup for this lick would be what I call a 1/3 plus bar. A 1/3 bar would be 2/6, the first and second strings. I use the term plus to denote you touching the next lowest string for a deadening effect. That does you a great thing here. Then when you bend, you can let go of that note and you won't get an open string. Now let's listen to what would happen if I didn't use the index finger as a dampener. Okay, you hear the noise in there. And again, both times, I'm not using any right hand dampening. It's really good for you to practice just with your left hand, see how far you can take it, how clean you can get it without implementing any right hand blocking and dampening. You know, and then there's another issue here. When you release a fretted note, it's really a two-part affair. I see a lot of my students doing this sort of thing. They'll play a note and they yank their finger off almost as if they suddenly were touching a 200-degree piece of metal. And what happens is, you know, the string sticks to your flesh and you get a ghost open string, or you brush it, you pull it, you get kind of a quasi pull-off, right? That's no good. So practice playing staccato, but don't pick your fingers up. And that applies to all of your playing. You know, when you play scales, don't do this. I mean, look at that. You hear it, you can see how horrible it is, and you can hear how bad it is. Instead, continue to touch the next note when you go to a new string. Now another thing, any unused fingers, especially your second finger, because you know you use your first and your third fingers for that pentatonic. Notice how I'm using my second finger as a dampener. And any other fingers that aren't in play. Back to this lick. So you have this set up, you bend, and remember your options. We're dealing with that interval between the 4 and the 5. You have all those microtones. You could go, that's a different lick than, entirely different because it's got a different sound. So you go, now notice my thumb's way around. That's dampening some of this. And you know, I might dampen with my right hand, I might not, depending upon what I'm doing. A good workout is to take a lick and practice it from one end of the neck, way down here in the key of F or E actually, all the way up as high as you can. Now I haven't talked about playing in another key. Everything's been in the key of A. So that meant we were dealing with the same fret height, the same action, because we're at a certain point along the length of the string. When you start getting down low on the neck, especially with heavier strings, you've got increased string tension. The action's actually lower, and you don't need to worry about string noise as much, but you need to worry about leverage and facilitating the bends, so you want more reinforcement. Down here, let's move this whole idea down to the key of E. Here's your E minor pentatonic 6-string root scale. It's in open position, right? You're going to play the lick. So down there, use all 3 fingers. And you're depending upon that left hand lack of quick release. That's deadening it. Without it, you hear that? How I got an open G? I didn't strike it with this hand. It's because I didn't stay against the string. So, you can see how down there you might use all 3 fingers for the support. It gives you a lot more leverage. But as you get up probably around G or A, you're going to eliminate that principle and start implementing this index finger as a dampening tool. Okay, so that was one of those licks. In the next slot, I'm going to show you another couple licks that involve no left hand dampening.